This is the Retirement Key Podcast with Abe Abich, founder of Abich Financial Services.
What is really driving your thoughts on the market is probably not what you think. And we're going to talk about that as well as managing our nerves based on the market volatility that we've seen this week, Abe. As of the day that we're recording this podcast, March 10th, I mean, before we hit record, you were like, the markets are down. I think you said the S&P is down 4% today.
Yeah, NASDAQ's getting punched.
Yep.
Right
And
now.
for the folks that you work with, those that are close to or in retirement, there is nothing, well, there's lots of things that people are afraid of. But one of the biggest things we're afraid of is seeing a big market dip right as we're getting ready to retire or in our first few years of retirement, because it can just throw everything for a loop. So obviously you're here to help give us some guidance. Abe Abich,
absolutely,
founder of Abich Financial Services. You can find us at theretirementkey.com, which is also where you can learn more about, because Abe is an author as well, certified financial fiduciary and author of the book, The Retirement Mountain, The 7 Steps to a Long-Lasting Retirement. Is a quick read, just a little over 90 pages, so you can read it in a couple of hours. And talking about these 7 steps, Abe, chapter 14 is about step 4 and protecting your life savings, which as we get closer to retirement and in retirement is obviously paramount, because we've worked so hard to get here. Now we need this money to last. But we see weeks like this where the markets have been wonky. And when it comes to our tolerance and how much of your retirement savings you want in the market, this article on Kiplinger.com was talking about how many times your appetite for risk is not determined by your personality. Rather, it's reflected by what the market is doing at that time. So if you think about being on a winning streak in Vegas, you're going to be more likely to be optimistic and positive about the game versus when you're on a losing streak. Yep. Do you find this to be true? And what are the dangers that could be for retirees in this space and this thought process?
Yeah, great questions, Heather. And if you think about it, look, just imagine you were about to retire, as so many of our clients are, and you've got a ways to go, right? You personally have a ways to go. And as do I. I mean, we're both, 20 years away from retiring. Yep. However, our clients are not. Our clients are oftentimes months away, maybe a few years away, or already in retirement, seeking out a comprehensive plan because they have their investments. They have an investment plan. They have an accumulation plan. That's the whole reason why I wrote the book, the Retirement Mountain, ascending up your mountain. That's to the point of retirement, descending down your retirement mountain. That's the next 30 to 40 years of your lives where you're spending and enjoying that money and also continuing to grow it, of course.
Right.
So protecting your nest egg and what you've built is so paramount, because if you think about it, really think about it, your working paycheck is going to end and you're never going to see one again unless you work part-time for a little while, right? So you may say,
which
well,
goes against the whole purpose of retiring, unless you want to. Some people just like having something to do. My mom still works.
Of course. And probably not because she has to.
No.
And a lot of people, most of our clients, if they're continuing to work, if they work part-time or just choose to continue to work, it's because they want to stay active physically, mentally, stay sharp. Not drive their spouse crazy at the house, maybe have a shorter honey to-do list.
Valid.
Right? Yep. But if you think about it, at some point, our working paycheck that we just were used to getting for 50 years every 2 weeks is going to stop.
Yeah.
And what's going to start is income from this nest egg you just worked your entire life to build.
Yep.
So if you saved enough to retire, and for a lot of people, that's usually several $1 million. A lot of people that we meet with, it's usually anywhere from $1 million to $5 million. I know that's a big range, but it's usually in that range.
Yep. Oftentimes
$2 or $3 million. If that's the number that you needed to get to and you've hit that number, which means it's enough for you to last you, the next 20 to 30 years of your life, then you shouldn't take on any extra risks unnecessary to accomplish your goals, because that working paycheck's going to stop. And income probably needs to start from the nest egg. So if you just continue to invest like you were 30, 40, and maybe in your early 50s, where it's pure pedal to the metal, 80, 90, 100% stocks, well, you're going to live and die with the market, right? And yes, 20 and 30% returns are wonderful. 10, 20, 30% losses could just be terminal and crush your portfolio. And you may not ever be able to recover those losses. Yeah. Especially if you've got your hands in the portfolio for income at the same time, while there's losses. Think back to 2022, 3+ years ago, markets were down about 20% for a lot of people that weren't retired. That was a paper loss. Yes. If you had $1 million, you might have been back down to about 850K, a loss on paper. We saw the values go down on paper. But if you weren't pulling money out of your portfolio and you left the monies in the market, 23 and 24, we saw the markets rebound. And at the top of 2024, we saw all those losses evaporate from 2022. We've recovered the losses and we started hitting new highs. And even into just early 2025, we're hitting all-time highs.
Right.
Now we've had a pullback here recently. These are really important reasons why it's paramount and necessary for retirees that are just about to retire and those in retirement to get really serious about having growth and income protection, safety, all of it mixed in a comprehensive plan. So here are a few other ways to think about it. And so some points from the article, Kiplinger, that's talking about markets ups and downs. So what if the value of your account does go down 20, 30% or more? Could that be detrimental? Just think about this for yourself. Could that be detrimental? Would you then not be able to retire? Let's say you've got 2 million, you lose 20%, you're down 400 grand. So if we're following the 4% rule, maybe you're thinking, hey, I could take 4%, 3%, 4% from my 2 million, generate $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. Now you're down to 1.6. 3 to 4% is a lower number of 1.6 than 2 million. Would you then be able to retire? Would you have to alter your lifestyle, your expenses? Would you have to, choose to play less golf, take less trips, whatever it is that you want to spend money on? Might you be forced to adjust your lifestyle as a result? Could it mean not taking a trip or two that you've, promised yourself you're going to take? Perhaps on the other hand, Heather, you've saved so much that a 20 to 30% loss wouldn't hurt you at all. I mean, if you have $5 million or more, which isn't, most people don't have $5 million or more, but if you did, maybe you could afford to lose $1 million. Maybe you could afford to lose 20%. You still have 4 million, and that might be enough, So if you said yes, and I was asking these questions, if you said yes, and you say, yeah, that would really hurt me, that would alter my lifestyle, that would alter my retirement plan, then you're probably taking on too much risk and you probably have too much exposure.
Okay.
So these are things that we really need to get serious about, especially before it's too late. We've got some volatility. We personally think and believe, this year we're going to have continued ups and downs, and we're still hopeful and hoping and expect the markets to have a positive year, but it might not be. I mean, we might have our first down year in 3.5 years since 2022.
Okay.
And again, how would that affect you? Yeah. So it's so important. A few other ways to think about risk tolerance, Heather, just trying to break this down and keep it as simple as possible.
Okay.
Oftentimes we'll ask our prospective clients and just commonly check in with our current clients about their current risk tolerance, and we'll ask on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being all cash, 10 being all stock, and a lot of people come in as an 8 or a 9.
Yeah.
Where do you want to be on that scale heading forward, right? And if someone says, I want to be a 5, well, that tells us as a firm, they want to split their monies right down the middle or pretty close to that between a growth-focused portfolio and an income-focused part of the portfolio, between risk in the markets and between safety perhaps out of the markets. If they're a 60-40, they're okay with having a little bit more risk, taking on a little more risk in their portfolio. They might be early 60s, early 70s, have some good pension income, Social Security income. Their appetite might just be their appetite might allow for more risk taking, right? And by taking on a little more prudent risk, we would likely get rewarded long-term with more return. So we'll ask our prospective clients and we'll check in with our current clients, usually a couple times a year throughout the year. Where are you right now? Are you still comfortable with how you're allocated? If you're not a client, you're invested like an 8 in your workbook. We ask you these questions. You say you want to be a 5. If that's the case, we really have to bring down the equity exposure. We really have to bring down the stock side of the portfolio from your current 80-20 down to a 50-50 to make sure this money that's invested is meeting your goals, that's you're comfortable with how it's invested, because you need to understand the pros and cons of continuing to be that 80-20. And while you'll probably squeeze out more return and likely would squeeze out more return as an 80-20 versus a 50-50, that's going to come with more risk. It's going to come with more loss. Can your stomachs handle that?
Right. Okay.
Do you want to handle that? Most of our clients, most of the people we meet with, because they usually have $1 million to $5 million, are saying, no, I don't want to stomach that next -20. I don't want to stomach. I never want to see again that -38 that we saw in 2008. And for most people in retirement, during their drawdown years, if they're early in retirement, like I'm talking still between 60 and 70, you lose 40% of what you saved that just took you 30 to 40 years to get to. Look out. And it's going to alter some things.
Yeah.
A -40 takes a long time to recover from.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you're in the distribution phase where you're actively needing income from the portfolio.
Okay.
You see?
Yeah.
It can throw people into a huge pickle, a huge challenge. And so we really want to get serious about just putting as much control around the portfolio. And stock market downturns, stock market risk are one of the biggest risks that can affect our nest egg. And so we want to control what we can and get out in advance by putting together a proactive plan that's going to continue, Heather, to help us grow it, but to continue to help us protect it at the same time.
Okay. Thinking about the person listening and or watching this podcast episode and is a DIY investor or somebody that is working with a financial advisor, giving this group of people some action items in the way of what questions should they be asking themselves and or their current financial advisor that to get answers to. And if they aren't able to answer those questions themselves or get those answers from a financial advisor, why they should come to Abish Financial. I guess what separates you, what's the difference maker for DIY investors? What separates you from other financial advisors? What questions do people need to be asking, and what action items do people need to be taking right now if they're close to retirement?
Great question. So whether you're working with somebody or not, number one, you need to understand how you're invested. So if you're not 100% sure as to how you're invested, then we can run the reports for you. You know, whether, you know, if you're a current client, you're going to be in our portfolios. If you're not a client, then we can run that complimentary report through Morningstar, through Riskalyze. It's a black and white report. So it's going to tell you, hey, Heather, you got 78% in stock, 15% in bond, 5% in cash, whatever your allocation is. But we can produce that report by having someone's statements and by having the positions that somebody's in, and the report doesn't lie. It's through Morningstar, and it is what it is. You give us those holdings and statements, and you can see yourself on paper. That's when you can truly understand, all right, here are the pros, here are the cons of how I'm currently invested. And typically it needs to be tweaked somewhat. I mean, usually, oftentimes, people are coming in as potential clients taking on too much risk.
Okay.
It's a big reason why people are coming in realizing, hey, I haven't tweaked this thing. I've been running with it for years. And man, thank God the market's been up. But I need to make sure that this thing is in check, that this thing is buttoned up as much as possible heading into my distribution year. So number one, you need to know where you stand. Number one, you need to know how you're allocated.
Okay.
Stocks, bonds, whatever it is, that's going to help you determine how much risk you're taking. It's a geeky term called standard deviation.
Yeah.
And you got to go back to 8th grade to remember what standard deviation is. If you can remember that far back, maybe college statistics class. And it's basically the biggest measure of investment risk. And the bigger your standard deviation number, the bigger the risk is in your portfolio. The wider the potential swings and volatility could be in your portfolio. You need to understand how you're allocated, the risk, the cost. What do the funds cost you in your portfolio? If you're in mutual funds and funds that you bought 10, 15, 20 years ago, there's a really good chance you're paying more than you should be in fund cost. And fund costs are like termites and can eat into the net return of your portfolio long term.
Okay.
So we'll use low cost passive ETFs, stocks, and typically instruments on the market side of our portfolio that are extremely low cost. As an example, like a Vanguard ETF. Vanguard's a big name in the industry because of their low cost funds, very diversified funds, and ETFs are also very low cost. Those are some of the main things that I would look out for if I was approaching retirement, whether you're working with an advisor or not. And if you're not, how would you know? I mean, you probably don't have access to Morningstar and this reporting software. that can truly tell you how you're invested. So how would you really know? More than likely, you don't. You might have an idea. You might be in a large cap fund and a mid cap fund and have some fixed income in there and some money market and things like that. You might have a good idea, but you want to truly know. You want to truly know, like before you pull that trigger and make that decision to retire. You want to truly know and be confident, be as confident as possible. And I firmly believe, and our firm believes, that can only come from having a really detailed, comprehensive report and analysis of what you have.
I think that we talked about this before, that so many people think that they know, but a lot of things can get buried. There's fine print in every single aspect of our life, it seems. And when it comes to your money, when it comes to hidden fees, that's a real thing. And for people, you see it all the time at the office where people come in and they say, oh, we're paying 1%. And it's like, well, you're paying 1% to your advisor, or you're paying 1%, but there's another fee in here. And then there's
Fund
this other
costs.
fee, ends up becoming 3% on up from there.
We just had a couple come in the other day with 3 annuities from Equitable. Now, nothing wrong with Equitable, the company. They're kind of like a Prudential.
Okay.
But they have variable annuities where the product fees were between 3 to 4%.
Really?
On about $400,000. It's like $12,000 to $15,000 a year in product costs.
That they didn't need to be paying.
Unnecessary. So we're going to try to help them get out of those.
So X-raying all of your, not just your stock investments, but understanding if you have an annuity. That's the idea behind the plans that we build here at Abish Financial Services. It's about looking at everything that you have, getting it all into one plan, letting you really understand what's going on with where you have your money and how that money is going to be working for you in the years ahead. This is the point of having a portfolio X-ray, because we're X-raying the entire thing to show you where you're standing, what's really going on with your money. And if you're 59 and older and have saved $500,000 or more every single day, doing it at Abish Financial, complimentary. So if you want to get to work on that, find us at theretirementkey.com. We also have links posted in the show notes, so you can just click there. Again, it's theretirementkey.com.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Key Podcast with Abe Abich. To learn more about Abish Financial Services, visit theretirementkey.com and join Abe for his radio show, The Retirement Key, Saturdays at 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. and Sundays at 8 a.m., 2 p.m., and 5 p.m. Abish Financial Wealth Management is a registered investment advisor with the SEC. Registration as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training, and the content of this communication has not been approved or verified by the United States Securities and Exchange Commission or by any state securities authority. The information contained in this material is intended to provide general information about Abish Financial Wealth Management and its services. It is not intended to offer investment advice. Investment advice will only be given after a client engages our services by executing the appropriate investment services agreement. Information regarding investment products and services are provided solely to read about our investment philosophy and our strategies.